Hi guys, welcome back. Today I want to share with you the last 3 books that I read. I read these 3 books in French because, as you might recall from my previous videos, I have challenged myself to read only in French during the month of July, and I have continued to do so and want to present to you what I've been reading. So from the 3 books that I'm going to present to you today, 2 of them were unfortunately disappointing, but we're ending on a positive note because the 3rd book was actually really good. So let's get the ones that I didn't enjoy that much out of the way, but I still want to talk about them. I do think it's important to talk about what can be disappointing in a book, because it might be that something that I found disappointing you just don't mind, or you might even enjoy. So without further ado, the first one I read is within my kind of quest to reread childhood favorites. It's another Nancy Drew book, Alice au manoir hanté, and the English version is called The Hidden Staircase. In this book, we follow Nancy Drew as she is called to the house, the ancestral home of 2 elderly ladies who have lived in this house forever and now complain of strange noises that are happening seemingly inside the walls in the middle of the night, and they're seriously considering selling the house because they just can't have some peace anymore. And one of them is even going a bit towards the superstition side and is thinking that some ghosts have come to the house. So this is, I think, a recurring theme in the Nancy Drew books, is that anything that kind of feels supernatural has some natural explanations, and we have the same in this book as well. I remember really enjoying this book as a kid, and that's why it was in my little selection of books that I got from my parents' house and that I brought here to revisit. And so far, you might recall some of the other ones that I've presented. So far, I only enjoyed one of the ones that I brought, which was the one set on Hawaii. And this one was really not really good. And it probably has a lot to do with just me being an adult reader now and having other expectations towards the book. The character development of the non-recurring characters, so the ones that are new in the story, is really surface level, borderline caricatural. Some plot points also didn't make a lot of sense. Obviously I won't go into details, but especially in this book I thought the plot holes were really huge, and I really didn't appreciate 2 of the characters in the way that they were depicted. You have the ugly witch type lady who is old, and a lot of the themes of like ugly people are bad people, and that really irks me. It might not have really occurred to me reading it as a younger person, but now I'm really uncomfortable with it. So that was not too good, and I thought it not that suspenseful, or not as much as I remember it as a kid. And again, my thoughts might be completely distorted by nostalgia, but I'm a bit sorry because I have since then brought the 2 remaining Nancy Drew books that I had brought back to my parents' house, because right now I'm just not interested in revisiting these anymore, which is a bit sad, but I'll probably have another phase where I want to do that again, so that's fine. Next up, I read another French book. I'm not sure, it's probably not published in a translation yet, though the author has written a lot of other books previously, and most of them have been translated to English. The author is Sandrine Collette, and this book is fairly recent. I got this for my birthday from my mom because she got it recommended in a bookshop in my hometown, and it's called Et toujours les forêts, and always the woods. I didn't know anything about this going in, obviously, because I got it as a gift, and the blurb was really not saying that much, but I quickly realized that it's kind of a post-apocalyptic fiction, which usually is like, that's totally my jam. But in the end, it just wasn't such a good reading experience for different reasons, unfortunately. First, I think also reading more about the author and her other books, I think the way she writes and the worlds she is building in her books is so pitch dark that probably the tone to begin with is not something I enjoy. I don't mind talking about difficult topics and things being partly dark, but I need some kind of differentiation of that view, because there is always another view and there is always a way to differentiate that. And I think authors can also do a great job at finding the light in the darkest places. And I think the author, with her work, I guess from what I read from the other books, she is not really looking to do that at all. She is not going to give any lighter side at all. And that was incredibly hard to read. So in this book, we follow a young man called Corentin, and he is pretty much not wanted. He was never wanted by his parents, and his mother in his childhood just keeps bringing him to people to take care of him, and she just gives them money or sometimes even forgets to pay them. And he really grows up with this feeling of not being wanted at all in this world. And when he grows up and gets to have an education, he is starting to find his place in the world, but then this cataclysm strikes the earth and essentially, I guess, kind of burns it. So a lot of the vegetation is gone, everything is dry and desert-like, and he is still very much bound to his grandmother, who took care of him for some time before he went to the university. By some miracle, he escapes this cataclysm, and he then goes on a quest to go back to where he comes from, go back to his grandmother, and try to find out if she's still alive and if there's still people there. The writing is kind of sparse and very hard-hitting, and at the same time really lyrical. So the writing was really, really beautiful. I really enjoyed it. But at the same time, this sparse writing built some kind of distance between me and the characters that the author was depicting. And it made the whole story really dry and almost empty of feelings to begin with, which I thought was okay in the depiction of the aftermath of such a catastrophe, and how people first feel completely empty and helpless because they don't know what they have left to live for, basically. But throughout the book, it just continued on, and it really kept me from connecting to the characters. So that's definitely not good, because if I don't have world building, if there's no sort of suspense or anything, I need to have some great character building. And I didn't find that as well. And then, unfortunately, I thought also that the plot had some holes. There were some things happening that just felt too convenient for the plot. I'm not gonna go into details, but some things happening after such a catastrophe that you would think this would never have lasted or survived, and it does, because it serves the plot, was really too convenient and made me even more in disbelief of the whole characters and their dynamics. So this sounds really unclear. I'm not going too much into detail because I think this book is for a certain public, and I've heard it compared to The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I haven't read The Road, but I know I don't really want to read it for the reasons that probably I have talked about in my feelings of how the setting and the tone was of this book, and so I can see why it's compared to that. So if you're a lover of The Road, this might be your perfect jam. And there's a lot about family dynamics and how family is not always related to blood. That was really interesting, but it would have been more interesting if I would really care about the characters at all. So unfortunately, not a book for me, but it was still fun to go into a book completely blind, because that's something I almost never do. When I buy books for myself, I always research them. And yeah, it was just, in that respect, it was a nice change of pace in my reading. Finally, the book that I pretty much read throughout the first 2/3 of July on audiobook was La Vagabonde by Colette. The English translation is The Vagabond. I knew about the French author Colette beforehand, but I had never really read anything by her, and got this book recommended by Julia from the channel Julia's Book Time. She has read it in its English translation and she really enjoyed it. So I put that one on my reading list first and ended up really enjoying it. This is a book from the beginning of the 20th century, and we follow a music hall artist called Renée Néré. She is sort of a failed author. She kind of talks about how she used to write and use her writing in a therapeutic way, and she stopped after a really traumatizing event. And she tells us about this event, and it's not really a spoiler. She was married quite young to a man that was really treating her like shit. He was sleeping around and really not hiding it at all, using her basically as someone to just order around. And she is kind of a broken woman when we first meet her at the beginning of the book. She has found no other way to sustain herself than to work in a music hall. She has an act together with another man, and they do some dancing acts and singing acts and so on. And so there's a lot of depiction of what music halls were like in the beginning of the 20th century in Paris, what this milieu is and what kind of people were moving in it. And that was really well done. And Renée's life really changes when she meets a man who once knocks at her door in the music hall after a show. And he is a very wealthy man, and he is pretty much head over heels for her. They start to build this relationship, and Renée really comes to question whether she really wants this relationship, because she has sworn off, attaching herself to anyone because she got so badly hurt. And essentially the whole book is a discussion on women's agency in that time and women's independence and how it can be achieved and how very often it couldn't be achieved. How the place of the woman also changed in society at the turn of the 20th century. And Renée really ultimately has to choose between having her full liberty, not being really well off, but doing what she loves and, controlling her life on her own, but then also feeling very lonely and solitary and sometimes needing an attachment to someone, but how society directly puts this role on women that if they attach themselves to a man and marry a man, that's directly the whole thing and the whole dynamics change and they don't have that agency anymore. And I really enjoyed that discussion, and the writing of Colette is quite lyrical. It's almost a bit stream of consciousness, but not in a hardcore way like Virginia Woolf's writing. And it was just perfect for me, to be honest. It really felt like you were in her head, but it wasn't going on like crazy tangents and, going all different places and mixing up voices. It was very much about Renée's voice and thoughts and feelings. And I really enjoyed the ride and thinking along with her about all these topics. And it's definitely quite an avant-garde book, especially for the time it was published. It was, I think, published 1910 or 12, and has a lot of parallels to the author's own life and what a crazy life she has had. And I really enjoyed reading up on that as well after my reading. So this is a book I would really recommend to you. And yeah, a really good read. So these are the 3 books I wanted to share with you today. Ending on a positive note, of course. I hope you're doing well, you're keeping safe, and you're not melting from the heat like I am currently. Let me know down below what you've been reading these days, if you have been reading anything, or if you, like me, have had problems concentrating on books because it's so hot. Let me know everything down below, and in the meantime I hope you're still reading great books, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!